You know, Bitcoin's whole promise was always this one simple, revolutionary idea, a financial network that's totally decentralized, controlled by no one, but open to everyone. But now that it's this global giant, we have to ask a really important question. Is that promise even true anymore? Today, we're going to peel back the layers and find out who really pulls the strings on the Bitcoin network.
All right, so let's just get right to it, shall we? For years, the #1 buzzword for Bitcoin has been decentralized. But here we are, and you have to wonder, is it really? The truth is, it's way more complicated than most people think. So, let's investigate.
Okay, before we go any further, we got to get on the same page about one key term: hash rate. The easiest way to think about it is this. Hash rate is the total number of security guards protecting the Bitcoin network at any given moment. The more guards you have, the safer the network is. It's the raw power that secures the whole system.
And believe me, the size of this security force is just mind-boggling. We're talking over 864 exahashes per second. That's a number so big it's hard to even imagine. And it jumped almost 50% in just 1 year. So yeah, there's a massive ongoing investment in security. But here's the real question. It's not about how big the army is. It's about who's giving the orders.
And that brings us to the heart of the matter, the decentralization paradox. Because while the network's total security is bigger and stronger than ever, the control over all that security has become, well, surprisingly concentrated. Let's break it down.
Okay, so take a look at this. This is the first layer of the problem. You see, individual miners, they team up in these things called pools to get more consistent payouts. But the side effect is that just 4 pools, Foundry USA, Ant Pool, F2 Pool, and Via BTC, are coordinating all the work for roughly 70% of the entire network. Just let that sink in. 4 entities are directing the vast majority of Bitcoin's security.
But here's the thing, right? The pools are just coordinators. They're like dispatchers, not the guards themselves. They don't actually own the super powerful computers doing all the work. So to find where the real power lies, we have to ask another question. Who owns all that hardware?
And when you ask that, you uncover the next layer. A massive chunk of that hash rate comes from just a handful of huge publicly traded companies. We're talking about industrial-scale miners like Marathon, CleanSpark, and Riot, most of whom are based right in the US. These are the giants running warehouses full of mining rigs, and their decisions create huge ripples across the entire network.
Okay, so we've got the pools and we've got the industrial miners behind them. But let's go even deeper. Let's follow the supply chain. Where do these incredibly specialized, powerful machines actually come from in the first place?
And this is what you call a critical choke point. It's pretty wild. The entire global Bitcoin mining industry basically depends on just 3 companies: Bitmain, MicroBT, and Canaan. These 3 firms make and sell over 90% of all the new mining machines. If you control the supply of the hardware, you have enormous leverage over the future of the network.
Now, this concentration of power isn't just about corporations. It's also about geography. And that, my friends, is where things get really interesting. It's leading to what some people are starting to call a geopolitical hash war, where entire nations are stepping onto the battlefield.
Just look at this timeline. It tells the story of a huge, dramatic power shift. For years, China was the undisputed king of Bitcoin mining. But then, boom, in 2021, the government banned it all, sparking what's now called the Great Mining Migration. And who benefited most? The United States, which is now the #1 mining hub in the world, with Russia also grabbing a much bigger piece of the pie. It's proof that a single government can totally reshape the network.
And it's not just the mining is happening in these countries. No, it's getting way more direct. We're talking about governments themselves jumping into the game for all sorts of strategic reasons. You've got the nation of Bhutan using its sovereign wealth fund to mine with surplus hydropower. You've got El Salvador literally using volcanoes to mine Bitcoin for its national treasury. And then you have countries like Iran and Russia where mining becomes a powerful tool to get around economic sanctions. The line between a company and a country is getting seriously blurry.
Okay, so let's just pause for a second. We've seen power concentrated in pools, in giant companies, in a few hardware makers, and now even in entire countries. But so what? Why does any of this matter? What's the real risk here?
It really boils down to 2 big threats. On one hand, you have the nightmare scenario, a 51% attack.
That's the ultimate power move, where an attacker can actually go back and rewrite history, letting them spend the same bitcoins twice. But there's a more subtle threat, and maybe a more likely one: transaction censorship. This is where the powerful miners simply decide to ignore or block transactions from addresses they don't like.
And look, if you think this censorship stuff is just some far-off theory, it's not. We have evidence. Researchers have already spotted it. Blocks coming from major US-based pools that look like they're filtering out transactions based on the US sanctions list. This is the smoking gun. Proof that pressure from a government can directly lead to censorship on a network that's supposed to be for everyone.
So what about that other threat, the 51% attack? Well, the estimated price tag to buy enough hardware to pull it off is huge, around $10 billion. For any normal person or company, that's impossible. But for a nation-state, for a global superpower that wants to disrupt a rival or control a new financial system, $10 billion? Well, that might just look like a bargain.
Okay, I know, this all sounds a little grim, but the story doesn't end there. Not by a long shot. The Bitcoin community is hyper-aware of these problems, and there is a serious, multi-front battle being fought to push back and keep the network decentralized.
One of the key weapons in this fight is a tech upgrade called Stratum V2. See, with the old system, the big pool operator had all the power. They decided exactly which transactions got included. But Stratum V2 completely flips that on its head. It gives individual miners, even small ones, the power to build their own blocks. It's about taking control away from the central pools and giving it back to the network's edges.
And the fight doesn't stop there. It's a battle on multiple fronts. You've got people pushing to get miners set up in new, diverse places like Kenya and Paraguay. There are teams working on open-source mining hardware to break that manufacturer monopoly. And brilliant folks at places like MIT are building tools to act like a neighborhood watch for the network, giving everyone an early warning if someone tries to act up.
All right, so let's boil this all down. What are the key things you need to remember? First, there's a serious choke point at the pool level, with just 4 pools coordinating most of the action. Second, the hidden power lies with the industrial miners and the tiny group of companies that build the machines. And third, you can't ignore geopolitics. Governments are getting involved, and their regulations can directly threaten the network's neutrality.
Which leaves us with one last big question. We like to think of Bitcoin as this finished product, this impenetrable digital fortress. But maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. Maybe it's more like a battlefield in a permanent Cold War, a constant ongoing struggle between the forces of centralization and a global community fighting like hell to keep it decentralized. And the winner of that war is still very much being decided.